Well, hi everybody. Hi Steve. How you
Hey,
doing?
Rog.
Yeah, good.
All good.
Time to do another life-changing words where we get to just chat about a phrase, a few words that had an impact at certain points in our lives. But I guess particularly when we were athletes, I guess. So, Steve, it's your turn today. What have you come up with?
Well, interesting that you position it like that, Rog, because this is actually a saying that I picked up in retirement from sport, but wish I had heard
Oh, that's nice.
back in the day when I was an athlete. And it's attributed to Marshall Goldsmith in his fairly famous book, "What Got Me Here Won't Get Me There." And I think this was around the sort of mid early 2000s. The book came out. And I remember hearing the saying, and it where it really kind of resonated at the time. I suppose in a nutshell, we were retiring athletes, and it was very relevant. What got us to where we were then at that time was never going to get us anywhere in the future because I had to hang up the javelin, you hung up your spikes and your lycra shorts, and off you went. It's got to, and we weren't F1 drivers or Premier League football players, so we were in a position where we had to change. But so the saying that I'd like to just dwell on and shine a light on is that what got me here
Yeah.
won't get me there. Now, what does that mean? Right. So when I reflect on that, and the reason I say I wish I'd heard it back in the day is, you know my story as well as I do, because we do a lot of keynote sessions together and workshops and so on. So the particular part of my story where I broke the world record, I was world number one, and life could not have got any better. And I consciously made the decision to stand still. I remember having the conversations with coach and saying, let's just do the same again. Things are going incredibly well. Let's just press pause. Let's not get
Mm,
hurt. Don't take
mm,
any risks. Things are working out fine. Why change? And that was a mistake because if I'd have really understood the meaning of that saying, what got me here won't get me there. In other words, you have to evolve, you have to change, you have to, be creative and take small steps. And it's not about big changes. And we know all about that now with our change workshops.
sure.
And it really struck a chord, many years later. And I think for that reason, and then layer in the fact that, we were two retiring athletes, um, having to come up with a new way to thrive and prosper and gain success in our lives. What got us to where we were was never going to work out in the
But
future. And I suppose it links into the work we do with the growth mindset, the Carol Dweck
Well,
work,
it's
and
kind of everything, isn't it? But I
yeah,
mean, the interesting thing for me from what you're saying there is you talked about being the best in the world, being the world record holder, and then just carrying on doing what you were doing, and clearly you didn't go forwards, you actually went backwards. So you're saying that phrase is relevant to you when you're at the very very top of the world, but I think most people listening you would relate to that phrase when things aren't going well, when you think, oh, what am I doing? It's things aren't going well, and that awareness that you've got to do something. And it's interesting because I always found in sport, when things were really bad, when you were injured, and we both had a fair share of injuries, when you're running badly, you're injured, and it's just not happening. Actually, in some ways, it's easier at that point to make changes because you
I
have to.
agree.
The
I agree.
challenge is when actually you're doing really well. I mean, you're talking about breaking the world, world record holder, world athlete of the year. Just keep doing what you're doing, you're going to be fine. So you're what you're picking up from that phrase is, especially when you're at the top of your game, you've got to listen to that phrase, not just when things are going badly.
Yeah, I absolutely right, Roger. I think you're most vulnerable sometimes when things are going well because you don't have those alarm bells. And I think,
Mm.
as you've alluded to there, I vividly remember times when you're injured and you have to get creative and you have to, work hard and stay focused and pay attention to the detail and you have to keep your foot on the accelerator and move forward. And I think that's where you use the word easier. It doesn't feel like that when you're in it, of course,
No,
because you're
no,
firefighting, but
yeah,
it's easier to have clarity and to obey
yeah,
the concept of what we're talking about, because what got me to where I am won't get me to where I want to be, because inevitably to get somewhere different to where we are right now, we're going to have to do something different. So it's about embracing change. It's about, being creative. It's about committing to a new level of performance, maybe accepting input from other members of the team, a new collaboration. You know, there's many aspects of that, and what I love about these episodes, these series of conversations that we're having, is that a small phrase at the right time can of course make a big
You
difference.
know what's interesting? You
And
earlier
that's the
said
point.
that we know each other's presentations really because we either do it individually or together. And there's a phrase that you haven't added into this conversation that I think is what you're talking about as well. And I remember the first time when I shared a stage with you, and you said this, and I've always at that moment I thought, wow, I've never actually thought of it that way and heard it that way. And you articulated this phrase, and I think this phrase comes into the mix with what we're talking about here. And this was, you talked about you broke the world record and world athlete of the year, and then you started to go backwards, and then a few years later you came back, got back to number one in the world. But the difference then was the phrase that you came into your life was, if I want to stay in number one in the world, I have to live, train, think, and work as if I'm number two in the world. And I love that phrase. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about. It's obviously no roof of complacency, but I love that thought of, if you want to stay the best in the world, you've got to keep chasing. So you've got to live as if you're number two in the world. And I think that's a really good phrase as
And
well.
that particularly hits home when it's literal as well. I mean, of course,
Yeah, yeah.
it's metaphoric, but in the case of the context of the story that I tell, that was literal, and to retain that hunger and desire to go forward, and it comes back as well to what makes you tick and what your why is in the first place. And I love competing. I love embracing the dynamic of competition. I love that and loved that, and I still do that, and playing golf at the weekend in the club, for the club and so on. It's part of life, or my life. And I think the point is that, if you love competing, you have to, you have to embrace that. You have to get involved in that. Number two in the world, it's frustrating. I want to be number one in the world,
Yeah.
whatever that means,
Keep the hunger.
metaphorically as well,
Keep the
because
hunger.
that's not a literal translation
Yeah.
anymore. But yeah, you're spot on. And the other, I thought you were going to go down a different route there, because something that our business partner does when we do our workshops, a guy called Paul Mallinson, for those who haven't seen us together, but what Paul does in the end of most of our workshops, in asking the question, if there's one thing that you could do sustainably and particularly well, that would make the biggest impact on your life, what would it be? The one thing. And I think the point of that question is, we're not suggesting what got me here won't get me there, so let's change everything. Let's do everything
Sure.
differently, because that'd be stupid, right? And what we do know is, I know Marshall Goldsmith's, there's a wonderful presentation on YouTube, actually. It's worth a listen. It's an hour long, but it's him presenting. He's a brilliant presenter, funny. And he talks about, he used to ask people to change three things, and over the years he's whittled that down to just one thing.
Yeah. Keep
because
it simple, right?
because it's really hard to focus on more than one thing at any given time. Because if we change the most apparent thing that it's going to have the biggest impact on our lives, and we change that thing, and change is difficult, so that might take a bit of time, and it takes us to a new destination, and then we do the same again, and we apply this saying that we're talking about today, what got me here won't get me there. We're destined to continually evolve, adapt, and grow. And that's what I guess everyone is after, right?
Yep, absolutely. Okay, mate. That's a lot in that one, wasn't there? Cool. You chucked a whole lot into that, not just the one phrase. So just as we like to do, let's just end with you just reminding us of the words the words that changed your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So what got me here won't get me there. Great saying to have in the back of the brain when it comes to, what should I do next? It can mean different things as well, and particularly relevant, I think, in a process of taking on new challenges, having a new dream of whatever success looks like.
Brilliant.
But it's certainly had a big impact on me.
Nice one. Cheers,
Thanks,
mate. I
Raj.
like that.
Great
See you
stuff.
next time.
Cheers.